coming through. All right, looks like everybody is a go. Thank you guys. All right, I'll start with just brief intros. My name is Molly Pettengill. I'm the Associate Director for Graduate Recruitment. So I help organize all these events and try to guess what kind of content you guys want to see. And then we invite awesome people like Charlotte to come in and help give us that programming. With me, my amazing department, or I don't know if you want to call it department, but office coordinator is Jen Faria. Jen, want to say hi? And then, of course, we have Charlotte McCurdy, who graduated from the Industrial Design Department and has been working with us in missions for, I don't know, I want to say like 3 years now. You've just been consistently amazing.
I just say yes whenever you knock my door. I'm happy to.
Love, especially for those of you who don't know, Charlotte is making the news almost every day now. I feel like the things that you're talking about are super important, both personally, but also professionally. And yeah, so we're so excited that you're here today to share your story and your studio practice with us. So welcome. Charlotte, do you want to just introduce yourself really quick and give us just a brief synopsis? What's going on?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. It's always weird to like shout into the void, but I'm really happy to be here and really happy to talk to all of you. I am Charlotte McCurdy. I did my graduate work at RISD, graduating 2 years ago now. Sorry, lockdown is endless. Welcome to my lockdown like studio in the woods out of the city, trying to do my best to be part of social distancing. And I think especially for anyone who's considering coming to RISD, who's thinking about industrial design or any of the design departments, and anyone who's coming from not a design background. So I did my undergraduate work in social sciences. I studied global affairs at Yale. And for a lot of people around me, like my decision to go to RISD looked like a hard right turn, but actually it was the absolute logical next step for the questions I was exploring. And I don't know, in general, and even if neither of those themes touch your interest, I hope that, I don't know, I can illuminate a little bit of why I think RISD is a really unique place for doing original research and why I recommend it insofar as I keep coming back and trying to help students get a sense of what it's like to be part of the grad program at RISD, even in these unusual times. I think it's, and I'm also I'm part of these unusual times in that I'm teaching a seminar for the first time in the industrial design department. So I'm sort of coming back to the farm and happy to be on sort of the other side of that table with the amazing faculty as my peers now. So yeah, I can jump into presenting, or I don't, Molly, you've got
well, yeah, I mean,
vision.
I guess I just want to remind our audience too that we'll reserve about 10, maybe 15 minutes at the end if we get going with a lot of content for questions and answers, but we can start that as soon as we want. So for our audience, go ahead and type your questions in the Q&A tab and we'll just queue them up, first come, first serve, and Jen will help us moderate some of those questions because we understand some of them might be more admissions related. That's what we're here for, but also very specific to you, Charlotte, as well. So why don't we start just by you telling us sort of how are things going in the middle of this pandemic, and like, has it brought any changes to how you're researching, what your practice looks like, you're making,
Definitely.
or challenges around any of that?
Definitely, yeah. So my practice, I have an individual practice. I'm not part of like a consultancy or agency. I don't work for a firm. I am my own practice. And that was actually something that I didn't realize until after graduating from RISD, is how incredibly high the rates of entrepreneurship are amongst RISD alums. Like it's really remarkable. And I had so many peers who were like already serial entrepreneurs coming into RISD who sort of have helped me think through building an independent practice. I bring up the fact that I have an independent practice because it actually made the transition to lockdown like as easy as it could be, because I already was like basically a one-man shop and could throw, there was a day in March where I like threw the essential parts of my studio. I was like like triage, like what will fit in the back of a pickup truck, go, like
Yeah.
one pickup truck worth. And I had a project that had just kicked off, collaborating with the fashion designer Philip Lim. And so I had this very fabrication intensive project that was ongoing and needed to like break it down, pack it up, move it. And I am now here out in Long Island. I've been working out of a garage, which it's super interesting to do sort of bio-based, relatively climate sensitive work in a non-climate controlled space. So there's been all kinds of new things to learn and test and like tweak. But as much as it was disruptive, I compared to the main holdups on that collaboration were on the Philip Lim side, because they had to shut their offices down, the mills that they rely on to weave materials all shut down. So it was a testament to how being scrappy and independent actually sort of made me uniquely positioned to like keep going in a way in which I think a lot of other people like were forced to pause. So right now, I just on Friday handed off my side of the collaboration to the Philip Lim team. And so now it worked.
It's done. You can go, whoa, that was.
Yeah. And now I just have to like work on being a little bit more photogenic for whenever it premieres.
That's cool. I mean, I think we're all working on being more photogenic. We actually just got our media kits in because we're a RISD. We can't not do this virtual thing and think about the filming aspect of it, right? So
I have so many thoughts about this that are not relevant to RISD, but yes, like, and actually I think that's important. It's super important. And I think actually that's something that is actually students are sort of uniquely well equipped right now, because the production values all across the board have dropped. So like the scrappy thing you put together in your backyard is that's premium content. So like you can get your work out there, I think, in a way that maybe normally would be a little harder.
Totally. It's forced us all to rely on social media, really heavily. And we've actually started in our office doing these features on us, because typically we get to meet all of our prospective students and we can't even hear from them even in a place like this. Like you said, we're just talking to the void. So we want to try to make some connections and give them some live social media story content and access to us as much as possible. Actually, we're going to be posting some office hours and things like that, which will be helpful. But let's dive in. You mentioned, Charlotte, about your transition from Yale social sciences into being kind of seamless. Talk about that a little bit, and talk about maybe your biggest learning curve too, coming to a place like RISD.
Totally. So it was seamless to the degree that I'd always been someone who like made things with my hands. And I think that, so I was able to sort of put together a portfolio of these like crazy things I made for the experimental theater company I was affiliated with. And like, so so basically part of my sort of story is that I've always sort of felt like I was riding two horses at once. And there was like the analytic part of my brain and the creative part of my brain, and they were always separate. And I didn't, and then my academic work was all super analytic, like statistical work on development economics. And then I was doing all this creative stuff on the other side, and then went out into the world, worked in sustainability consulting, just like gave up on that creative part of me. And it's because partly I think I didn't know that design really existed as a field, and it was a space where I could be both analytic and creative and be my whole self. So it was a gift, like to find that I could pursue design and be sort of both of those people at the same time and be more integrated in that way. So it was a transition in that sort of all of these, I think RISD does a good job, I think, in that since the industrial design department has a lot of professors who like come from different perspectives and backgrounds on what industrial design is. So there's no one dogma that you have to like fit into. See, everyone is sort of their own iconoclastic flavor, and like sort of industrial design as a field is so young and it's constantly evolving. So like to not be prescriptive about it, I think is really important to actually future-proofing your practice. And so I was able to show up and be like, I have this weird background. I think in these weird ways, like I'm going to make maps of the whole earth. Like, and the faculty were just like, cool, that's awesome. Like,
Yeah.
we're excited. We'll ask you questions. We'll help you draw out like why you need to do certain parts of it. But I didn't have to like pretend to not have this whole part of my brain and this whole part of my background. Like being my whole self actually like made me stronger, and was like part of the learning curve of like learning to embrace and not feeling like an imposter at RISD, where there are all these like especially the undergrad population, like a lot of those kids, 18-year-olds have been like known they were on this track for years, and their skill set is impeccable, and they're like so like to get over that imposter syndrome of like, no, actually my slightly adjacent background is actually part of the strength I bring and like the gift I can give to my peer group, and like my peer group is coming from all of these different fields, and so we end up making this like really intense sort of beaker of reactions and interactions that make the whole thing much richer. So that was awesome. And then in terms of the hardest part of the learning curve, I think the thing I really, and it's not a hard, it was actually amazing, like innovation, like breakthrough, obviously this is the way everything should be done, is that adjusting to the crit and critique as a format, and like the shift from like a more liberal arts university model where like you are producing work for the professor and the professor evaluates it and gets it back to you, and it's this very narrow channel of communication, to instead being in front of the room with your peer group at every deadline, and like getting feedback, getting asked questions, having all of these people see your evolution and growth, and to be able to support you. And like the number of times like after a crit, someone, especially at the graduate level, because people have lived experience and networks and context, and someone will come up to me and be like, actually, like I weirdly was really good friends with this ocean carbon cycle scientist in my undergrad. Do you want me to put you in touch with him? Like, yes, I do want to talk to a carbon ocean cycle scientist. Like stuff, because that fits my interest. But so that peer effect, the peer group at RISD is like the richest part of my experience, at least, and I think many people's. Faculty resources, those are all great too, but like peer group is like what you take with you for the rest of your life too. So
very much so. And I also think that when you're thinking about applying to a grad program and you don't come from that kind of background, or even if you do, the way to think about going into your graduate experiences, forget about like the fear of failure, right? Because that sometimes, or most times, will become, again, the catalyst for that major transformation, for the aha moments, and then, you know, puts you in the right place for the projects you're going to do probably for the rest of your life, potentially, you know, or at least the next thing. And it's funny, people go into their grad program and think they're just starting, and then they finish their thesis and they're ending, but really they're starting again. So it's this ongoing thing of like this life experience that you take into it, and you mash with your peers. And yeah, I mean, it's just what you can get out of it, and the opportunities that you can get out of it really is the most important piece of it. Speaking of what you did when you were in grad school, why don't you share your presentation, or share some images and talk us through the work that you've been doing, because I'm sure a lot of this is kind of out of context for our audience.
Yeah, no, apologies to the contextlessness. Okay, so this was my thesis, and this has become the foundation of my practice since then. So, and just to echo what Molly was just saying about failure, I would lean harder on that, be like, fail as much as you can. Like this is one of the rare moments in your life where you're buying your own time. Like grad school is an investment, and you're buying the space to to do only what you want, and like this is the space and time where you can take the biggest risks and fail wildly, and that's good. Like that's the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's actually been really, that's part of why I'm excited to be coming back to teach this seminar, is that like I've been part of New Inc., which is an incubator out at the New Museum, which is full of incredibly creative, powerful people, but because they're more client facing, there's much less appetite for risk because you can't afford to fail in the wild, in a way in which you can while you're a student. And so like, yes, it's not about grades at all anymore. It's about like making your best work ever. So this is a raincoat that I made out of a plastic that I developed that's made out of marine macroalgae. I'm just going to this is the current collaboration with Philip Lim, where he tasked me with making paillets for the textile apparel people. They'll know what that word means. I didn't know what that means. Basically sequins. I'm not talking to you, Siri. Thank you. And then I've spent the last year like dealing with a lot of communication and translation around the science and this vision. And then I'm also newly part of this collective called Alternative Thinkers with Daisy Ginsburg and a lot of other amazing people who are asking me to step up teaching. Okay, so that's the quick rundown of what I'm up to. I'll save this activity for a second. We've talked a little bit about my background, development economics, sustainability strategy, RISD, magical conduit, and now I am a designer somehow, but I'm also all of these things all the time. Okay, so this raincoat. So I started with an interest in climate change and wanting to talk about climate change in new ways. And I sort of am interested in design as, it sometimes is called an agonist approach to design, where it's objects that are making an argument. I'm interested in design as like a nonfiction creative form. So I wanted to make something that sort of illuminated climate change without using the sort of frankly stultifying metaphors of glaciers and penguins, which are not relevant and don't get us fired up. This, you might recognize, is the wildfires happening right now. And it just blows my mind, the scale of the situation.
Where is that picture? I'm just curious. Where is that picture? Is this like a satellite image?
Yeah, this is a stabilized satellite image from Sierra. And you can see, so there's the top of California.
Yep. That's incredible.
Oregon. And yeah, it's amazing that this is happening, and it still doesn't, I mean, there probably are people on the call right now who are out west for whom it's very real. But making climate change really real and vivid is an interest of mine. And so I got really interested in the intersection of materials and climate change, because generally with greenhouse gas emissions, we focus on electricity generation and the fuels for transport, which is reasonable because it is the biggest cut of emissions. I'm going to quickly go through these infographics because they're too dense for the time we have. But I got really interested, I don't know, are you going to be able to see my mouse? No, you can't see my mouse. You see this bottom left quadrant? I got really interested in direct emissions because solar and wind have crossed the threshold of being cost competitive. So actually the issue of energy generation is solved both from a technological and from a market perspective. It just takes rolling out. My favorite factoid in this regard is that the Kentucky Coal Museum is currently solar powered because it's the cheapest source of electricity for them. So like, it's going to take a lot of implementation and work, but from a design perspective, it's not a problem for design in terms of thinking about the future and thinking about a system. So I got focused on direct emissions, and I got really interested in, I'm not going to talk about this because it's too much. It's too much. I got really interested in the role that cement, steel, and plastic play in greenhouse gas emissions, because if we're actually going to decarbonize our society, and decarbonizing is sort of a misnomer, but it's the standard term in the industry right now of stopping our pattern of taking carbon out of the ground and putting it into the air, so breaking our dependence on fossil fuels, but also the fossilized carbon that we use to make our materials as well. So vast majority of plastics are made from fossil fuels, but you might not think about cement being made from fossilized coral. And that's why cement is such a significant greenhouse gas emitter, is because it's another process by which we take carbon that was underground, we bring it into the biosphere, and by applying heat, we crack off a carbon dioxide molecule. So if we as designers, as people, are trying to think about what our material culture will look and feel like when we've totally decoupled our supply chains from these ancient fossilized carbon resources, it's going to be a totally different world, right? Like we can't have our conventional plastics, we can't have our conventional materials. And I got really interested in this because it seemed like an opportunity to, instead of focusing on what we stand to lose because of climate change and what we'll have to give up to fight climate change. The common way we talk about climate change is about penance and sacrifice and like not doing as much, which is incredibly privileged and Western, because like telling people to stop pursuing like the needs of their family is not ethical in a huge cut of the country. But that's sort of our rhetorical turn, which hasn't been working anyway, because here we are. So instead of focusing on sacrifice or how bad the apocalyptic horror movie version of climate change, instead, I thought if I could make artifacts from that decarbonized future that gave people a window into the fact that this future is not it's not just a desaturated version of the present. It has its own new sources of beauty and quality and forms of expression and materiality. And so that was sort of where I sort of landed, was on this question of what would it feel like to get back into a present tense relationship with the sun? This is a quick little, how we make plastics right now. It's carbon that was sequestered by algae hundreds of millions of years ago, and now we're pulling it out of the air. I chose a garment because there's precedent in technology for leading from luxury goods. We can talk about that later, and so what if instead we just used algae that was living right now, and we could trap carbon into the polymer bonds of our materials? So it all centered on this question of what would it feel like to get back into a present tense relationship with the sun. I did many different sort of experiments trying to make objects that started this conversation, that was a tool that let me talk. And this plastic thing just kept on working. So I did not set out to be in the biomaterial space to make a garment. It purely emerged from the process. And so it's made of macroalgae. There was tons of beautiful failures along the way. Part of what was interesting about pursuing this as a designer instead of as a scientist is that I got to be super omnivorous in who I wanted to collaborate, who I wanted to learn from. And I also got to ask really straightforward questions, and not maybe even stupid questions, and not feel shame for not already knowing, or for not that I didn't know. It was sometimes stuff like this, like this question of like, where is the carbon? Where is it on Earth? Like, we don't talk about, like, let's ask this really straightforward question. And this is probably not coming through very clearly at all for you because of bit rates, but you can see each C is an atmosphere's worth of carbon. So 720 gigatons of carbon. Gigaton, by the way, billion tons, not the way we talk, but that's the way scientists talk. Are they surprised we don't understand? So each C is an atmosphere's worth of carbon. The terrestrial plants and soils, biomass, holds 3 times as much carbon as in the air. So every time we cut down forest, every time we burn, every time we replace it to expand our agriculture. So like questions like these, being able to ask questions in terms that are more meaningful to lay people, because we don't think in logarithmic scales, we don't think in parts per million. The way that these facts are being communicated to the public are not being made meaningful often. And then we're surprised that people aren't motivated by what they're learning. And now we're going to be trapped in this animation again. Lots of carbon. And okay. And so it's made of macroalgae. We can talk about lots of beautiful failures. Being at RISD was really critical. So because I was taking all these different classes with different techniques. And so in my own time, I got to do research touching the chemistry and touching the biology, talking to geologists and geophysicists, but also I was working with the glass casting facilities at RISD and thinking and observing the way glass artists dealt with annealing ended up being like a major breakthrough. And actually the hard part of this wasn't the formulation of the chemistry, it was the process for casting and curing it. And that's much more of an industrial design problem. RISD also has amazing, bizarre tools like scanning electron microscopes. So I got to look at it under very high resolution and understand its structure a little bit better. And as I said, and this is all the photosynthesis that happens on Earth. This is it. This is what plants do. It's amazing. There's a whole other thing we can talk about there. But then I landed on this raincoat as sort of this charismatic object that hierarchically is the starting point that brings people into, if they're so interested, into this conversation about, hey, actually more materials than you think are currently made of fossil fuels. And B, they don't have to be. There's a technological revolution happening all around us right now. And if we had the vocabulary to ask for it, we could be dismantling our reliance on petrochemicals at a time when, I will note, there's a whole other sort of the politics part of this. The petrochemical industry is investing heavily in selling us more plastic because they know they're not going to sell us fuel going forward. And then this became this got picked up for the Cooper Hewitt Triennial, the nature triennial that opened a year ago. Is that right? Oh my God, lockdown. It's a
I don't know what day it is. Yeah.
Time. It's my theory is that every day is Tuesday. It's just every day is a Tuesday. It feels like Tuesday forever. And then this has become a platform for all these other opportunities because of the time that I bought to do my own thinking, I ended up sort of developing this fairly unique point of view on what our goals should be in terms of materials, and talking about sort of bringing carbon negativity into frame as a goal, as something more necessary, but also more ambitious than just carbon neutrality, and sort of how do we get beyond sustainability and into regenerativity, because we're at a point where there's already too much carbon in the atmosphere. It's not just about we have to stop adding more, but we also need to be increasing the ways in which we pull carbon down and out. And then I spent a year thinking about nuclear disarmament, because I think about existential threats. That was interesting. It had some interesting outcomes that I couldn't even attend the final thing because of security clearance stuff, but it was another instance of talking to experts who tend to have gatekeeping vocabularies, and the public, their point of view is not super welcome. The algae plastic led directly into this partnership with Philip Lim. The UN Office for Partnerships and Swarovski got together and wanted to create an incubator for advancing sort of more like idiosyncratic views and more ambitious views of sustainability in the fashion industry. So I've sort of accidentally fallen into fashion because I made a garment. Now I'm talking to all these fashion people. And that's been incredibly interesting in terms of the sort of idiosyncrasies of how different disciplines even start to hold on to concepts like sustainability. And then the question was sequins, and making sequins that also all of their pigment is also petrochemical free, fossil free. Because as you might know, most of our contemporary dyes are azo dyes that are petrochemical in origin. So again, if we're going to decarbonize, if we're going to disentangle ourselves from fossil fuels, we need to rethink our colors. And so this was another great, super interdisciplinary opportunity where I actually sat down with a friend of mine from my RISD grad time who came out of the painting department to talk about like oil paints and the history, how we made pigments pre-industrial revolution, pre-fossil fuels. And then talked to some people from textiles about natural dyes, and sort of got to pull all of these different techniques together. So like, that's also, I think, worth saying about my work, is that like, it's pro technology, but it's not just like futuristic technology. It's actually that we have a lot to learn from technologies we walked away from. In some cases, people still obviously use natural dyes and oil paints. But yeah, so in lockdown, I've been doing a lot of sending of photographs back and forth to the Philip Lim team, and lots of phone calls. And we're gonna have something, it was supposed to premiere right now during New York Fashion Week, but that's obviously not happening in the way that anyone thought it would. And so it's probably gonna premiere in December. And I don't know if that was helpful at all, but that sort of helps maybe contextualize the kind of work I was able to do at RISD that drew on my skill sets and backgrounds, but also got to be totally reinvented, and I want to say like liberated through a design frame that let me make the kind of impacts I wanted to make. And so also I think it's worth noting that like, from the sustainability work I was doing before, the part of why I wanted to come to design is that I saw that so much of the way we were conceptualizing sustainability was coming from the culture side. Writers and creatives who were asking deeper questions than just implementation were shaping the conversation that would then drive companies to change their behavior. So I wanted to be part of the cultural questioning side of the equation, go a little farther upstream in terms of impact, but hopefully be able to nudge the cloud in a way that would make my work impactful and meaningful.
Yeah, and I mean, people are, so that's great. I mean, I think about all the time, like, okay, so I go back to like, what's the purpose of the designer, of the MFA, of the artist? Especially, you know, the fact of, I'm an artist, but I'm also looking for future people to come into RISD, and why is that important, you know? And not only is it the time and the space to be able to do these things and make these mistakes and find like the next new color or solve some urgent issues in the world like you are, you know, but also that oh geez, I forgot the second part of this now because I got so wrapped up.
It's important. I mean, in terms of why do this?
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like most of the people
absolutely.
on this call are probably not like, I'm not sure about it. I don't know.
No, yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people, it's something you have to reconcile with yourself, right? Like, why am I making this? And okay, I remember now. The most important piece for me, and I don't know if it feels this way for you too, was that I wanted to start a conversation that either turned way too political and just divided people, right? So I feel like you're doing that really well and taking the politics out of it.
Yep.
And for me, that was my goal too, with having the sustainability conversation without polarizing anyone, without saying you're wrong if you're over here and you're right if you're with me, you know?
Yep.
And I found that making art is a really great way, because in a way, the things that we make are universal in their language, right?
Right.
So I feel
I think that this connects to issues far beyond climate change, right? Like the act of creating something is propositional. You're saying this didn't exist before and I want it to exist. Yeah, I think it should exist. And that's an assertion about the future you're trying to build across societal challenges.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, RISD does a good job of letting, like, and to be super clear, like, if you come to RISD, you don't have to work on sustainability or climate change at all.
Right. I know this
like,
is just,
I want to be super clear about that like it creates this space. And I think especially at the graduate level, like I think the goal is to, like, as quickly as possible, understand the terrain, get to the edge of the field and look into that white space and create work in that white space. And like, I think RISD does a pretty good job of, and again, I didn't go to any other school, so I can't make like scientific statements in comparison, but you're not being asked to like fit into any mold. You're being asked to like define the future of the field and be contributing to the discourse by making like authentically contributive work that hasn't been done before on any topic space you're interested in. And like, that's the opportunity of the thesis. That's the thing that's so different from an undergrad experience where you're trying to like, you're being put in the oven and baked into a thing. Like, I think in the graduate space, you're being asked to like push the field of whichever field you're in. And like, that's such a rare opportunity. And it's also like so little time, especially if you're coming from, you feel like you're coming from a different field. You're like, I don't have time to like go for the white space, but like,
I think a lot of people like want to come into something and know exactly what they're going to do and when they're going to end and come in with a plan. And I'm a planner, and that was the way I sort of saw it. And then I went in and it went completely the different. And you just have to be okay with the fact that you have to dive full in, like you have to go full in, full force, take the most of the opportunity, because you know, you said it so right with that, you're buying your time. That's what it's, this is for. And so the timing of this is also really interesting. I went a little bit too early, took a year off, went back, because I was like, no, I'm not ready yet. And if you can't, so let me ask you this, how many years or year did you take off in between undergrad and grad?
It would have been 2.5 years. Yeah. Because I did the 2.5 year program. In ID is a little bit unique in that there's, for people who don't have an undergraduate degree, you can add an extra 6 months. And back to the like, there is not enough time. I was like, yeah, I'm going to take 6 months more time and get an extra summer of internships. And also on your thread, I showed up at RISD and I applied to RISD very sure I wanted to make interactive installations, robots in public. Like that was the goal. Like that was, and I like did a lot of creative coding. I did a lot of robotic stuff. And then the summer before my thesis year, I went and worked for the incredible new media artist, Raphael Ozena-Hemmer, who has his studio up in Montreal, who is like OG robots in public kind of guy. And I sort of looked at this and I was like, oh, I'm not to put down people making robots. There's important work to be done around robots. But for me, I looked at that and I was like, in this field, I think I will only ever be derivative of my heroes. And how do I go and talk about revolutions that are defining my generation, not the generation above me? And so I did this like hard pivot of like, no, it needs to be about climate change. And I'm going to end up in like biotech and green chemistry by accident over the course of the year, because that's what the problem set needed. And so like, yeah, like you come in, I'm totally a planner too. Like I came in with and I came from strategy consulting. Like I had a PowerPoint deck of my plan. Yeah. And I had the time and space to learn and adapt and adjust that plan to better serve my deep goals. So yeah.
Yeah, I think just be ready for sort of failure, but also to experiment and to take risks, because that's really what it's all about, you know?
And to sincerely learn.
Yeah.
Because if you're not adjusting your approach, then you're probably not actually learning.
Right. Process, man.
Yeah.
Well, listen, we have about 20 minutes left and we have so many questions.
Oh my goodness.
Charlotte, so I think we should just dive right in.
They're invisible to me. I was like, no one's asking questions.
Everybody's asking questions. Jen's been answering some behind the scenes, so thank you so much, Jen. But yeah, Jen will moderate these and yeah, go for it, Jen.
Yeah, I just want to thank everybody for typing in some really thoughtful questions, and we'll try to get through as many as we can with the remaining time. And keep them coming in. If we don't get to your question now, we'll work on answering them after the session if you email us at admissions@risd.edu. for the first question, and these are mostly all geared towards you, Charlotte.
Okay.
Is a transition from experience and user resource to industrial design a program, in industrial design, a path that the program looks for?
I think this is a great question because it also highlights that an adjustment I need to be sure to be clear about is that like my particular highly experimental like futures approach to industrial design, again, these departments are not monoliths. Like that is not the approach that you have to take. So I have peers out of my cohort in industrial design who their passion was user research, and they made incredible theses where I had one colleague who was like fundamentally rethinking workwear for women and ended up at Reebok doing like user research. So there's definitely a path for that kind of work. And for many other kinds of work, there are people who came in like with a strong branding background who then used their thesis work to be a platform to build their own agency. You know Dave Pittman, probably, Molly. I'm talking about Dave Pittman, who like now is the like in-house graphic designer, branding strategy person for the VC firm that supports all the most important vegan brands. Like, so beyond all of it, like, and he's a vegan activist, like all this, like you can totally do with the program whatever it is you are trying to do in terms of
the ID program too, Charlotte, to your point. I think that the way in which we think about disciplines here, while you do have to apply to one discipline, it's really about how you identify as an artist, but it doesn't mean that you have to prescribe to this one type of painter or type of ceramicist, right? We really want a diversity of perspectives and ideas and backgrounds. So coming from places like, we've had people come from sports backgrounds into ID, with people from theater backgrounds into ID, you know, so many different ideas, and that's what makes it really like a melting pot of perspectives, and where that crit really comes into play, because you want those different perspectives to give you feedback so you can progress. So,
and I would also to enhance, to highlight some parts of what you just said, Molly. I know this is not necessarily the case for all the graduate programs, but at least for ID, you have quite a bit of space in your course table to take electives from across all of RISD and Brown. So you can really build, like, there is a core thread, and you have your core studio where you're growing with your cohort and like being pushed to grow across the whole duration. But you're really able to build whatever, like what kind of expertise you want to be gaining and growing while you're at RISD. And I know that's to lesser or greater extent, some depending on the department, but I know compared to other graduate industrial design programs, there was a lot more freedom at RISD to really tailor from across all of the departments. So like, if you're really into, like, if you wanted to be like classic ID, gears, sprockets, like you can like do really intense metalworking and have the resources to like learn to and have access to making work that's exclusively that. But if you're not interested in that and you're interested in like user research, you don't have to like do all of the solid works and you're not being forced to fit any channel that you don't want to be in.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of collaboration that happens outside the classroom too. So while you have your studio electives, you have just the connection with Brown, the connection with each other to meet people outside. Of course, I think a lot of the graduate education is reliant upon how much you're willing to put in, right? Like what you're gonna get out of it. So meeting other people, being super engaged and participating in things, I think that is something that's super important. You advocate for your own education in a way of what you want out of it. So I think the next question actually, Jen, ropes into kind of the same idea. So I'll just say it. So what do you think, Charlotte, about the graduate experience? Do you think it's going to be as productive or challenging or collaborative now that at least 50% of it at least is online?
Definitely. So that's a good question. And I think as much I think I'm glad this question came up because I wanted to like push back a tiny bit on what you were just saying, Molly, in terms of like, yes, there are like interdisciplinary connections and collaborations. Like some of my best experiences were in grad seminars, which are designed to be interdisciplinary and bring together grad students from different departments. But also the thing that I think you have to be really clear about RISD is how hard everyone works.
Yeah.
So I kind of went back and I was like, college 2.0, it's gonna be lots of fun. I'm gonna make lots of friends. And like, yes, there is fun and there are like openings and get-togethers, but like, I've had friends visit who were in med school who were like concerned by how hard everyone works.
Yeah.
To be really clear, like everyone is so focused and serious about being there and making the most of it. And like self-care, balance, important as well. And like calibrate, like not getting sucked up in work that isn't actually serving your goal. Like it's not that no one's pushing you. Everyone's so driven. So I think that online, like this half hybrid situation is actually not going to change too much because it's not like skateboarding in the quad and high-fiving. Like you're in your studio, you're working, you're like getting feedback, you're talking, you're like melding minds in a seminar. Like all of that can still happen. So that would be, and also these guys are all perspective. Like it's gonna be solved and normal by next year.
Oh
right?
my God, we wish, right? I mean, who knows? I feel like I can't say anything was for sure, but
No,
I know
we're
getting really good at it. And you know, the feedback that I think Jen and I get from the perspective or from the current students in the program, from the faculty right now, are that they're actually getting more undivided attention than they have, you know, even just because you have to kind of schedule it, you know, and that their day is a bit more structured and they, you know, so they're actually able to figure it out. And, you know, for the departments that are really, really hands-on, like ceramics or glass, you know, the students that are either hybrid or fully remote have been mailed actual physical making kits so they can figure it out. You know, so it's been really cool to see that kind of an innovation. I do think that I just want to make a note, like we are hybrid, you know, so there is that connectivity on campus. It's just socially distanced.
Yep.
But what else we got, Jen?
Perfect. This is a really good question. Charlotte, how much development of your current practice do you feel is owed to your grad school experience at RISD? And were you ever challenged to change the fundamentals of your practice?
I would say hugely. Partly because I did not identify as a designer before coming to RISD. So the idea of having a studio practice at all was unusual. And then in terms of how I was challenged to change my practice, I was constantly, I had many specific instances of being pushed to consider different parts of my process, and I think there's a lot of like, you get RISD, back to the sort of crit format where you're like getting up, you're standing, you're presenting. There's never a time more in my life where I've been challenged with articulating the why on every decision in a process. And so, was I challenged? Absolutely. The other part of that question, did I change my process and practice? I would say that absolutely, in particular, I'm trying to be really precise, like concrete and give examples. I came in and most of my creative background and context was from derived site-specific performance from sort of this theater realm. And so that practice was like highly collaborative, very narrative, and like temporal and live. And RISD sort of gave me the space to like test over and over and over again, like being individual. And I do collaborate to a certain extent, but ultimately, like I have a lot of authority and control over the parts of things that I do, the kinds of questions I try to pursue. So to have an individual practice, to create sort of this hybrid thing where I'm drawing on my skill sets in like bench science and pattern making at the same, like that those were sort of pre-RISD. I had those skill sets as like discrete little chunks, and the challenge of integrating those like approaches and methods was something that I had to like find at RISD. I'll stop there. I think that answered the question.
I think so.
Yes, my studio practice is nothing like what it was before RISD, and I wouldn't say that that was because I was like forced to do it, but I was like given the space to find, and it's still evolving, obviously, right? Like I'm still learning new techniques all the time that help me solve the problems I'm trying to solve.
Mm-hmm.
And you will continue. It's a lifelong.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I think grad school sometimes can just be like this opportunity to crystallize a lot of the things that keep you up at night. And I say that a lot to my students or to my prospective students that I work with, and they're like, I wonder what the hell she's talking about. She's talking about like nightmares. And it's really about these things that have been bugging you that like you're actually going to make and do and see fruition through RISD, through RISD as sort of a vehicle, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah. What else, Jen?
That's a good question. How much of RISD's graduate work is networking and connection based?
I think that depends on the department.
Mm-hmm.
My sense of this is that the fine arts generally has more, because by nature of the field is more networking based in terms of like the value that you get out of being at RISD. The way I approached RISD, and I feel like a lot of my peers in sort of the design disciplines, is that it's much more about you like buying the time to make the portfolio that will launch the career you dream of, like, and actually like giving yourself permission to like embrace that dream, like, because like, I know this sort of gets back to the studio practice thing. Like when I came into RISD and I was like, I want to make robots in public and I want to go work for one of my heroes. Mm-hmm. And then I did that while I was still a student, and I got to try that on and be like, actually, I think my dream is, I'm not going to become one of my heroes by working for one of my heroes.
Right.
I have to go out and do it myself. And like that, getting to that point, and like being able to really focus on the thesis project as the like template of the practice. Whereas I feel like, in other, and maybe Molly, you can speak a little bit more precisely to this than I can, but I think the importance of networking depends on the department, but also I think that the networking happens really organically, because you are just working with these people, and also because there's such a breadth of skill sets that like I've had the experience of like being in a situation where I was trying to figure out like a super low cone glaze. And so I was like, I got to call up my friend from the ceramics department that I met through that grad study. Like, can we talk about glazes for like 30 minutes? Like, thank you, Eva, let's go. Like, so like there's all this networking that happens super organically that is just the product of people pursuing their passion.
Yeah. And I think that what we're doing on the admissions end of it, and us along with the faculty, we're curating that networking by admitting you into a very, in most cases, small group of people, to bring in those different perspectives. You know, that's one of the reasons why you were admitted to network with this group, because we think you're going to be able to contribute a lot to our community, but we also think we're going to be able to support you in what big ideas you have. So, yeah. We probably have time for like one or two more questions. You got any amazing big ones out there, Jen?
Yes, this is a good one. I think it can speak to beyond just the ID program and your experience. So much of your data and inspiration is scientific. At a design school, how do you find mentors and collaborators in interdisciplinary fields to help find answers and experiment? Were they readily available to you?
This is a great question. So RISD is a design school. It's a straight up art and design school. It's not a design school like attached to a research university. So I think that has its like drawbacks in that like I can't just wander over to the like marine biology lab, but it has its benefits in that people love to help RISD students. And like the experience of like cold emailing people who were like the person I needed to talk to about a topic and be like, can we just get on the phone for 30 minutes? I want to interview you. I'm working on my thesis at RISD. Just like the hit rate on that cold email was so high. It's so spoiling because people are really excited and interested in creative problem solving, innovative thinking, like the kinds of things that like the fact that you're interested in it, they're like a little flag is going off and it helps them do their work. So I would say that my work does touch a lot of data and science. Part of that is that that's just my background. So I already had a good tool set for pulling from publicly available data sets. And then in terms of collaborating with scientists or people with expertise from outside of RISD, which is broader, I think, than just my work or IT, there is a lot of there's a lot of richness in the faculty of people who have interdisciplinary practices themselves. But I think more valuable than that is that there are faculty who they also have had like collaborative or interdependent practices, and they can like help you, point you in the direction of who you should be asking questions of, who have more expertise in them. So it's not easy. You have to send the email. You have to like, this maybe gets back to the question of like how my practice changed. Like I had to get much braver than I was before RISD. Like, I'm still working on that. Like being putting myself forward in that way. And not like perseverating over an email for 3 hours like I normally do. And that was something that I was helped with by my peer group, being like, I literally had a moment during my thesis where like I was like pacing and like fretting about this one email I had to send. And one of my colleagues who like came out of Silicon Valley side of things, like, what are you doing? We're sitting down. Does that look right? Send it. Like, just do it, Charlotte. And like that, like, oh yeah. So it's just, there's always like amazing differences in work style that like you can learn through. Okay, but yeah, in terms of expertise, it is not a like D1 research university where you can where there's already channels set up, but that also means that you don't fall into the well-worn grooves. You do have to dig your own grooves, but they get to be your grooves, if that makes any sense. And there is Brown, and like there are definitely conduits to academics at Brown.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't think we have time for another question, but Charlotte, I love to ask. So are there any new partnerships that you have in the works? Like, what are you working on right now?
Oh, you're like, you come on. You finished your Phil Bloom project on Friday. Get on it.
What's coming up? Yeah.
I'm excited to focus on this RISD class and take this opportunity to further integrate my thinking. I don't know. I have 2 different agents right now, so they're trying to get me to do stuff.
Cool.
I don't know. Yeah, that's about all I can say probably. Yeah. No, but yeah, and like, just want to say thank you so much for having me, and thank you all for attending. And I am still part of the RISD ecosystem, so feel free to email me, as well as the admissions at risd.edu if there's any particular follow-up. I don't want to take the thunder of the closing. I'll hand it back to Molly.
We can connect you, Charlotte. If students have direct questions for you, we'll CC you. We'll do all the heavy lifting there. But thank you again. You're so gracious with your time, and
oh my goodness,
super interesting. We'll be continuing to follow your work and maybe bugging you for some more participation later on, but so appreciative. Everybody have a great, wonderful day. Thank you so much, Jen, and to all our participants.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you, Molly. Bye, guys.